Okay, so a lot of you wanted me to do this Green New Deal thing, and I'm trying to set this up so I can do this live because I haven't had a chance to really go through it in detail and write a script or anything, but I wanted to go ahead and get it done, so this might be a little raw, but we'll see what this Green Party's Green New Deal is all about. Building a better world tomorrow, today. It's time for a Green New Deal. Of course, you got to start off with the advertising thing, which is fine, but let's get down to what it actually says. The Green New Deal is a 4-part program for moving America quickly out of crisis into a secure, sustainable future. Inspired by the New Deal programs that helped us get out of the Great Depression of the 1930s, the Green New Deal will provide similar relief and create an economy that makes our community sustainable, healthy, and just. The thing is, the New Deal didn't get us out of the Great Depression. I mean, we hear this myth all the time, and there is no truth to it whatsoever. Just like there's no truth to this idea you usually hear from the other side of the aisle that World War II got us out of the Great Depression. Well, no, it just masked over it because now the government was spending money on planes and bombs and things that get destroyed, not things that actually make people's lives better. When you take out the federal spending component of GDP, then you look at private GDP, you find out, no, things were terrible, and they didn't actually get better until the war ended. When the war ended, they were doing exactly what the Keynesian economists said not to do, because they were saying, well, wait a minute, we can't just cut back all of these productions into planes. We have to keep building them because otherwise, jobs will be lost and people will starve, and you've got 10 million people coming back over from overseas, and that's going to be unemployment and all that. Well, Congress for once didn't listen to them, and 10 million people came back over, and Congress cut all of the spending, cut all of these wartime programs that were just making planes and bombs for the war. Factories had to retool into doing other things, and yeah, there was a recession there at the end of 1945 and on into 46, but then things turned around very quickly, and 46 and 47 became the 2 most productive years of the 20th century. And following that, you had the great prosperity of the 1950s. So, it wasn't the New Deal and it wasn't the World War II that got us out of this. And one of the big hints is, if you go and look at what people were saying at the time, no one was saying the New Deal stopped the Great Depression. You don't see anyone saying that until like the 1960s. People at the time were saying, well, okay, we all know that the New Deal didn't get us out of the Great Depression, but at least FDR tried something. Yeah, how long have we heard that? So, yeah, the New Deal did not get us out of the Great Depression. It contributed nothing whatsoever to that. And they are accurate when they say the Green New Deal will provide similar relief. It will, which is no relief at all, or if anything, making it worse. So, we'll go for it. The pillars of the Green New Deal, and the first one is the Economic Bill of Rights. Already from the title, you know this is going to be epic fail. Our country cannot truly move forward until the roots of inequality are pulled up and the seeds of a new, healthier economy are planted. Isn't it interesting that all of the people who seem to complain about equality seem to be pretty well off? They're like upper middle class or even richer. Yeah, funny that. Thus, the Green New Deal begins with an economic bill of rights that ensures that all citizens, 1, the right to employment through a full employment program that will create 25 million jobs by implementing a nationally funded but locally controlled direct employment initiative, replacing unemployment offices with local employment offices, offering public sector jobs which are stored in job banks in order to take up any slack in private sector employment. So, what will these jobs be doing? I mean, we tried this with the New Deal, hiring people to dig a ditch and then fill it back up again. If it's not something that puts food on the table, if it's not something that makes people's lives better in some way, then it's not really a job. It's busy work. Jobs are a means, not an end. It's a way of increasing wealth for everybody. But I mean, the only way you're going to increase wealth for people by working at a job is if the thing you do directly benefits people in some way. But if it does that, then you don't need government to create the job. Just let the free market do it. Local communities will use a process of broad stakeholder input and democratic decision-making to fairly implement these programs. What could possibly go wrong? Pay-to-play prohibitions will ensure that campaign contributions or lobbying favors do not impact decision-making. You may as well just say we're going to have unicorns that fart rainbows. There is just no way around the political interest paradox. There is no way around it other than taking power away from politicians. All right, you can put all of the prohibitions on this you want. Incumbents are still going to have a natural advantage. Everything they do is going to be covered by the news media. If it wasn't, they wouldn't be doing their jobs. Anything you try to do to make campaigns fairer will always tip them in the way of incumbents. And you'll just make established parties even more entrenched and established politicians even more difficult to vote out. That's the way it's always worked out. That's the way it always will. We will end unemployment in America once and for all by guaranteeing a job at a living wage for every American willing and able to work. There's supposed to be a natural level of unemployment in the economy from people switching jobs or from contractors when they have one job finished and they go and find a different one or whatever. This is part of a healthy economy. This actually makes things better for workers because it puts workers in a better position to be able to negotiate with employers. But if you're saying, we're going to guarantee a job, and you're pretending like this is going to be a benefit to the workers and it's not going to just, give the benefits to the employers and swing things, exactly the way you say you don't want to swing them. I don't know what you're doing here other than just being completely ignorant of economics. Unless you really are corporatists and you really don't care about the workers and this is your plan all along. But anyway. 2, workers' rights, including the right to a living wage, a safe workplace, to fair trade, and to organize a union at work without fear of firing or reprisal. Funny how that's not really the thing that's stopping unions. I know that's the narrative you people like to push, but if you live in a non-union state, you'll see this. You'll have a car factory or something like that. They tried this with, I think it was Audi in South Carolina. And the unions came in there and they went to the workers and said, organize into this union. And the workers were like, well, okay, what are you going to do for us? Because if you're a worker, you have to pay dues to the union. But they didn't really think they were going to get a benefit from the union that would help them out. Certainly not one that was worth the dues they would pay. So they couldn't get the workers to sign up. It's not that, these evil employers were, threatening to fire them if they made it. They just didn't want to be a part of a union. So what did the union do? They went to the state of South Carolina and said, you need to force them to join our union. Which, of course, South Carolina wouldn't do. But why would they have to do that if things are the way they depict them? They're not. They're not. Unions are no longer any great deal for the workers. They haven't been since the New Deal basically monopolized them. Because now they don't have to listen to what their workers actually want because the workers don't have a choice. If you're in a union state, you not only have to join a union, a lot of times you have to join a particular union. It's a monopoly. And monopoly takes away choice, and if you take away choice, you take away power. So really, the unions have power over the workers, not the other way around. 3, the right to quality health care, which will be achieved through a single-payer Medicare for All program. Yeah, what did we figure that was going to cost? Something like $4 trillion when the government only brings in, a couple trillion a year. Yeah, even if you spent money only on this single-payer Medicare for All program and spent the federal budget on absolutely nothing else, you would still be running massive deficits. And don't give me this economy of scale crap. I've got a quickie coming up on this, but, economy of scale works when you have a single product or service and you're just mass producing it and you can take care of the benefits of that. That's not how healthcare works. Humans are not products on an assembly line. Economy of scale doesn't apply to us and the problems we have. It might apply to certain problems, like there's a whole bunch of diabetics out there, so we'll mass produce insulin and get those costs down, which you can do a lot better without government. But, again, Learn some basic economics. 4. The right to a tuition-free, quality, federally funded, local-controlled public education system from preschool through college. We will also forgive student loan debt from the current era of unaffordable college education. Okay, let's work backwards. Why is college unaffordable to begin with? My mother is a child of the Depression, from a poor farming family, raised by a single mother, teenage mother, had her at 16 years old. They had nothing. But just with what my grandma, her mother, was able to save up, and what my mom was able to make working summer jobs, she paid for 4 years of college without going into debt. What happened? Your precious government stepped in. Oh, we're going to fix this. We're going to stop the inequalities. Then what happens? Of course, it gets more expensive. And then what do? What do you do every single time? Do you put the blame where it belongs? On your government? Of course not. You go, no, it's the terrible free market. And so you just keep trying to fix it and fix it and fix it. And that just makes it more expensive, more expensive, more expensive. You know, at some point, you would think that you people would get the picture here. That you would actually understand what's going on. And if it's tuition free, what do you think that's going to do? Demand is going to be sky high. You know, everyone's going to want to go to college. Now you say, well, isn't that a good thing? Well, no, it really isn't. Because if demand is high, then the cost is going to be even higher. It's going to be even more expensive and more unaffordable. And what are you doing? You're taking the burden of that away from college students and their families and putting it on the taxpayer, which means they don't have any incentive to compromise. And they don't have any incentive to choose a cheaper college over a more expensive college or whatever. And the fact is, a 4-year college just isn't suitable for everyone. There are people who do far better, you know, at a trade school where we're still needing things like skilled machinists and other forms of skilled labor. There's still a big shortage on those because everyone's saying, oh, you need a 4-year degree, 4-year degree. And so people are getting 4-year degrees in gender studies and basket weaving and things that don't do anyone any good whatsoever. They're not at all marketable. Remember, the whole point of this is to be able to do a job or create a job that's going to make someone else's life better in some way. That's how you make money in an economy. But all you're doing is just having them go through the motions so that 4 years later they can get awarded a piece of toilet paper. You know, because that's about all they're good for nowadays. I mean, go take a look at how it is now. You know, look at how many 4-year degrees. And I'm not just talking about gender studies here. I'm talking about like a 4-year engineering degree. Look at how much those people make versus how much people who never went to college make. Because you don't have to college to be like a computer programmer. You can learn that on your own. And all you have to do to get a job with that is demonstrate that you can code. You know, so well, why have the expense of college for people who can just do that? Or for people who can become, you know, skilled labor or whatever. You know, does a mechanic need a 4-year degree? No. Well, and we need mechanics. We gotta have our cars fixed, right? We gotta have someone to build our homes. Do you think people shouldn't be bricklayers? What's wrong with bricklayers? What do you have against bricklayers? You don't need a 4-year degree to lay brick, but that's someone's house that you're building. That's someone, you know, people are going to live there and that's going to be their home. And why is this a bad thing? You see, this is what we see all the time over and over and over again. This is nothing more than sheer elitism. That's all it is. That's all it ever has been. And as far as I can tell, as far as I can predict, that's all it ever will be. These are a bunch of spoiled, rotten brats who want everything handed to them and don't want to work. Let's see. The right to decent, affordable housing, including an immediate halt to all foreclosures and convictions. Wow. Yeah. You want affordable housing? How about stop monkeying with home values? Because what should have happened after the financial crisis is the price of housing should have gone way, way, way down. The only reason it didn't is your holy government. Because they say, oh, we got to keep property values high. We got to keep property. You're not going to get market clearing if the values are high. You want affordable housing? Get the government out of the way. Why don't you complain about places like San Francisco, where it's so difficult? Like there was one guy it was a disused laundromat, and he wanted to turn it into apartments. And man, he has been trying for years and just been hit right and left from politicians saying you can't do it and people protesting. And it's like, no, we need affordable housing. Well, if you let people build housing, you push out the supply curve and you bring the price down. That's how you get affordable housing. You are never, ever, ever going to get around supply and demand. It's just not going to happen. Create a federal bank with local branches. We already have that. It's called the Federal Reserve. Learn how this works. To take over homes with distressed mortgages and either restructure the mortgages to affordable levels, or if the occupants cannot afford a mortgage, rent homes to the occupants. Really? If they can't afford a mortgage, how are they going to afford the rent? Or are you just going to lose money by charging them less for the rent than the mortgage is worth? Do you see the problem here? Expand rental and home ownership assistance. Okay, let's think about that. Government is the reason why housing is so expensive. Instead of doing the things that it can easily do, which is just get out of it, we'll get it down with assistance, getting people on the dole, getting people dependent on it. Do you not see the problem here? This is all about protecting the rich. The rich want their high property values, and then the powerful, the elite in this country, get more and more people dependent on the government. That's what this is about. Create ample public housing. Wow, more housing projects. Yeah, exactly what we need. And offer capital grants to nonprofit developers of affordable housing until all people can obtain decent housing at no more than 25% of their income. They're trying to do that already. Get out of their way. That's all you have to do. The right to accessible and affordable utilities, heat, electricity, phone, internet, and public transportation through democratically run, publicly owned utilities that operate at cost, not for profit. Hey, I live in an area with an electrical co-op. That's how it's supposed to be. Let me tell you something, it's crap. The reason why you have problems with utilities being so high is because your holy government has stopped competition. Let different power companies compete for our business. Just like they're already competing with phone and internet. And what's happening? Service is getting better as prices stay the same or even get lower. You know, look at internet. You people were screaming disaster after net neutrality stopped. But what's happened since then? Speeds have doubled. Quality has gone up. Line quality wasn't even anything that was a part of net neutrality, but there are things that are more important than just your raw megabits. That's bandwidth. That's different from throughput, which is the amount of useful data you can get through. And so line quality, you know, if you've got 200 megabits per second, but there are a lot of packet drops, that extra speed isn't going to do you any good. And they're really ramping things up now because they're afraid of the competition that's going to come from 5G. And the stuff they're talking about with the 5G would be impossible with net neutrality. You know, having the different types of traffic for different needs. Do you need raw speed? Do you not need that much speed, but you need low latency? Or you need zero packet loss? You know, you manage your traffic differently based on those needs. If you're doing telemedicine, you don't necessarily need hundreds of megabits to do that, but you do need low latency and low packet loss. And with net neutrality, they wouldn't be able to manage their traffic to the point where they could offer those services. So, I mean, this is all about competition. The people who have problems with their internet is in an area where the local government has said, well, no one else can make internet service. It's only going to be this one. It's only going to be Spectrum. It's only going to be Comcast or whoever. They make a monopoly, and then they cry that, oh, it's a monopoly. Well, gee, wonder why. Stop being morons. All you're talking about doing here is another monopoly. Just a monopoly run by government. Oh, yeah, those are so well. We're going to have our power companies run like the DMV. Wow, yeah. 7. The right to fair taxation that's distributed in proportion to ability to pay. We already have that. That's the progressive income tax. You people put it into place. In addition, corporate tax subsidies will be made transparent by detailing them in public budgets where they can be scrutinized, not hidden as tax breaks. If you understood the difference between a subsidy and a tax break, you would not have written such a stupid sentence as that. I agree that morally they're the same thing. You know, a tax break should be where you lower taxes for everybody. If you're going to lower taxes just for this one company, then yeah, it's effectively and morally a subsidy. But in accounting purposes, it's not. So how are you going to... You're talking about wanting to put a line item in a public budget that doesn't exist. That's the thing. A subsidy is money taken from the taxpayers, which you can have showing in a budget, and going to the company, which can show in a different budget. And you can make that transparent, and I agree that should be transparent. I mean, it shouldn't exist at all, but what's going to happen with a tax break? You're not collecting money from anyone, and you're not giving money to anyone. So how do you put not collecting money into, yeah. Think about this for 5 seconds, and think about what they would do if you actually passed this. Since it's not collecting anything, all you would have to do is say, okay, here's the tax break line, and here's 0, or whatever. And then they're just going to put it on everyone and say, see, it's all equal for everyone. And how would you disprove it? You want them to record no money going back and forth, and you want a line item for that. How much of a freaking moron are you? All right, number 2, a green transition. The second priority of the Green New Deal is a green transition program that will convert the old gray economy into a new sustainable economy that is environmentally sound, economically viable, and socially responsible. Okay, well, first of all, if you want something to be economically viable, maybe crack open an economics book. Read up on it. Read economics in one lesson. Read some Bastiat. Read some, okay, Mises is a little intense, but, read some Hayek. Read some good economic sources and learn how this stuff works. Because you don't know. You don't know. It is clear that the people who wrote this document are economic know-nothings. All right, we will, 1, invest in green businesses by providing grants and low-interest loans to grow green businesses and cooperatives, with an emphasis on small, locally based companies that keep the wealth created by local labor circulating in the community rather than being drained off to enrich absentee investors. Okay, I'm going to add another name to the list. David Ricardo. Law of comparative advantage. All you're going to be doing is shooting these local economies in the foot. That's all you're talking about doing here. And also, it's interesting, they say, providing grants and low-interest loans. Well, who's going to be providing this? Is it going to be your government? Just up above it in number 7 of the previous section, you were complaining about corporate tax subsidies. Well, what is this? Is it not another subsidy? I guess subsidies are okay when they go to businesses that you like, huh? 2, prioritize green research by redirecting research funds from fossil fuels and other dead-end industries toward research in wind, solar, and geothermal. We will invest research in sustainable, non-toxic materials, closed-loop cycles that eliminate waste and pollution, as well as organic agriculture, permaculture, and sustainable forestry. All right, first sentence first. Research in wind, solar, and geothermal. What do you not see? Remember, it's not what you see, it's what you don't see. What you don't see is the one form of power generation that might actually work towards helping climate change, and that's nuclear. Safe, cheap, carbon-free nuclear power. Why every single time do these people snub nuclear? It's complete ignorance. Sustainable, non-toxic materials. There's no such thing as a non-toxic material. Now, everything is toxic if you get enough of it. There are no toxic materials, only toxic doses. Water is toxic if you drink too much of it. And my God, how many times on the podcast have we covered the problems with organic agriculture? It is not sustainable. It ruins the soil. It's not as nutritious. You are way, way more likely to get a foodborne infection from organic products. They aren't as nutritious. And they don't even taste as good. Taste tests, people either can't tell the difference or they actually prefer the one from traditional farms. And by the way, why is there anything at all to organic agriculture if they get behind things like ruby red grapefruits, which didn't even exist until the 20th century when farmers created them by bombarding a whole bunch of grapefruit plants with radiation and seeing what kind of mutants they got? And one of those mutants was ruby red grapefruits. That's perfectly organic. The whole thing's a fraud. And they know it's a fraud. We covered this as well. Check the archives. We've covered the documents showing that they know it's a fraud, and they have all of the things they do to tell people, all right, well, when they point this out, here's how not here's how you show that they're factually incorrect, but here's how you use fallacies to discredit this person. So they know it's a lot of crap. Provide green jobs by enacting the full employment program, which will directly provide 16 million jobs in sustainable energy and energy efficiency retrofitting, mass transit, and complete streets that promote safe bike and pedestrian traffic, regional food systems based on sustainable organic agriculture, and clean manufacturing. This has been tried a lot of times. Can you point to one time when it actually worked? Every time they come up with mass transit, for example, what happens? It loses money. No one rides it. There's like out west somewhere, some journalist was snapping pictures of these pretty much empty mass transit trains that were running around everywhere. And at one time there was actually like a coyote on the seat. That coyote was taking the train somewhere. Somehow I have a feeling he didn't pay. Now, these have always been money-losing propositions that have not met any of the promises. They have not created jobs. They have not made anything cleaner. They have not made the streets safer. All of these promised things never materialize. All right, 3, real financial reform. Now, this is something that shouldn't be too difficult. I mean, we've actually seen the way in the last 10 years or so, but we'll see what they say. The takeover of our economy by big banks and well-connected financiers has destabilized both our democracy and our economy. Yeah, and whose fault is that? The people who created the Federal Reserve and put all of our banks under that? So are you talking about ending the Fed? Huh? Is it? We'll see if there's, ending the Fed. We'll see if they want to end the Fed. It's time to take Wall Street out of the driver's seat. Wall Street isn't in the driver's seat, people. Give it up. They're speculating on what's happening in the future. They're not controlling it. And to free the truly productive segments of working America to make this economy work for all of us. One thing you have shown quite clearly is you don't know who the truly productive segments of working America are. Real financial reform will: 1. Relieve the debt overhang holding back the economy by reducing homeowner and student debt burdens. That's not the problem. None of this was the problem. It's government debt that's the problem. Idiots! 2. Democratize monetary policy to bring about public control of the money supply and credit creation. This means we'll nationalize the private bank-dominated Federal Reserve banks and place them under a monetary authority within the Treasury Department. This thing about the Federal Reserve being a private bank is a load of crap. They had to make it look like a private bank because before, every time they had set up a central bank, the Supreme Court struck it down as unconstitutional. So they had to make it look like a private bank, but who's in control of the Fed? Okay, it's quote-unquote owned by these district banks, but what does that mean? They don't have any control over it. They don't have any exclusivity over it. They don't get the profits from it because the profits go back into the Treasury. And sure, they quote-unquote own stock, but what does that mean if they don't get the dividends from it and they can't even sell the stock? The stock is just, pieces of paper that don't mean anything. The Federal Reserve is run by a board of governors, which is selected by Congress and the president. And then one of those board of governors is selected to be the chairman, again selected by Congress and the president. And it's also in the Fed's charter, and it's part of the Federal Reserve Act, that at any time, Congress can give an order to the Federal Reserve Bank, and they must comply. The federal government's already in charge of it. So it makes you wonder what kind of con they're trying to pull here. 3. Break up the oversized banks that are too big to fail. Well, there's one effective way you can do that, and that's to do nothing. Stop bailing them out. Get rid of all these financial regulations that create these big banks and, give them the protectionism that they have. Are you going to talk about that somehow? I don't think so. And taxpayer-funded bailouts for banks, insurers, and other financial companies. Okay, that's a good one. We'll use the FDIC resolution process for failed banks to reopen them as public banks where possible after failed loans and underlying assets are auctioned off. Do you see what they're doing? Do you see the scam? The way the FDIC is supposed to work, by the way it's sold to the people, is that if the bank goes under, you get the money that's in your account. Up to a certain amount, I think it's $250,000 per account. But that's not the way it works, is it? We saw that after the financial crisis. What did they do? They gave the money to the banks, and the banks did crap all with it as far as helping people with loans. So the banks didn't fail, but the people did, because they were still foreclosing their homes. But what do? They want to use that FDIC money not to pay back the actual depositors, but to nationalize these banks, turn them into public banks, in other words, banks run by the government. Yeah, they want even more of the centralization of banking that led to this problem to begin with. Regulate all financial derivatives and require them to be traded on open exchanges. You don't need to regulate them to do that. Deregulate them. It's the regulations that are stopping that. Because big banks didn't like these open exchanges that the free market was created, so they needed their own. Restore the Glass-Steagall separation of depository commercial banks from speculative investment banks. Hate to break it to you, sunshine, but that's a complete myth. Okay, that separation of commercial banks from investment banks was not repealed. What happened was it allowed these separate banks to be held by the same financial institution, the same overarching institution. But that had nothing to do with the banking crisis. Nothing whatsoever. The banks that failed, look at them. AIG, Goldman Sachs, things like that. They were not combined commercial banks and investment banks. They weren't. And by the way, no other country on the planet other than, I think, Belgium separates commercial and investment banks. No one else does it. Germany never did it. Switzerland never did it. Australia never did it. Iceland never did it. Canada never did it. It's never been a problem for any of them. Establish a 90% tax on bonuses for bailed out bankers. Oh, great. Yeah. Do I even need to touch that one? Yeah. You don't deserve that money, so we do. Yeah. Support the formation of federal, state, and municipal public-owned banks that function as nonprofit utilities. Under the Green New Deal, we will start building a financial system that is open, honest, stable, and serves the real economy rather than the phony economy of high finance. How is the banking system you're talking about any different in any real sense from the banking system we have? We have the problems with our banking system because of too much government control. Your solution is even more government control. What we need is less government control, which we will get, despite what you people want. We are creating it with cryptocurrencies and other innovations, darknet marketplaces that allow us to use our own money and trade with people in ways that you can't control. And you don't like that, do you? That's why you had to lie about Ross Ulbricht. Just make up outright lies about him hiring hitmen and throw him in jail for life, double life plus 20 years, when all he did, the only thing he was ever really charged with, was running a website in a place that you couldn't control. Not only was he not charged with hiring hitmen and was given no chance of defending himself with it, even though they told the jury about it and the judge used it to justify her sentence. Here's the thing. If he actually had been charged with it, they would have had to provide evidence, which they didn't have, and Ross would have been able to defend himself, which he would have easily been able to do. But let's say he would have been convicted anyway. The maximum sentence for hiring a hitman when no murder resulted from it is 10 years. So that's all he should have been put in jail for, is 10 years. Double life plus 40 years. How do you get that? That was a kangaroo court. Pretty much, read the judge's opinion. Read the judge's, what she wrote in sentencing. All her justifications for it. It wasn't about what he did. It was about making an example for him. We got to make an example of this guy. Yeah, he was convicted because of his political beliefs. And because he acted on those beliefs and he made a free marketplace. They might have sold some things that you don't like, but there was no evidence of any violent activity going on. And everyone knew it. 4. A functioning democracy. No such thing. Sorry, there's not. There's never been an example in all of history. We won't get these vital reforms without a fourth and final set of reforms to give us a real functioning democracy. Just as we're replacing the old economy with a new one that won't work, we need politics to restore the promise of American democracy. The Green New Deal will revoke corporate personhood by amending our Constitution to make it clear that corporations are not persons and money is not speech. Those rights belong to living, breathing human beings, not to business entities controlled by the wealthy. Oh, I guess the wealthy aren't human beings then. Can you name me a part of a corporation that isn't human beings? I mean, I guess there's buildings and stuff like that, but that's not the part that engages in speech. Corporations are made up of people. And what would it mean if money isn't speech? Do you people not understand how this works? Money enables speech. Money is how you get a platform to speak. Money is how you get a printing press. Money is how you can pay for airtime. Money is how you can, purchase equipment to record videos and send them out or whatever. That's what this is all about. What you're talking about is nothing less than the total and complete destruction of freedom of speech and the relegating of freedom of the press to a very few corporations. And you're talking about taking those away from the citizens. That's what you're talking about. It will only be business entities controlled by the wealthy who will be able to do it. Protect our right to vote by supporting Jesse Jackson's right to vote amendment to clarify to the Supreme Court that yes, we do have the constitutional right to vote. But yeah, we do. It's already there. As long as you're over 18, it's there. That's already there. These people haven't read the Constitution. I think that's the problem. Never actually read it. Enact the Voter Bill of Rights that will guarantee us a voter-marked paper ballot for all voting. Okay, yes, I'll agree with that. There should be a paper trail for all votes. Require that all votes are counted before election results are released. Replace partisan oversight of elections with nonpartisan election commissions. I don't know what that means. Any election commission you create is going to be partisan because it's going to be created by the parties that are in power. What we need is it to be independent, like it was back when the League of Women Voters were in control of the debates. Celebrate our democratic aspirations by making Election Day a national holiday. Yeah, all right. No problem with that. Bring simplified, safe, same-day voter registration to the nation so that no qualified voter is barred from the polls. Do away with so-called winner-take-all, in which the winner does not have the support of most of the voters, and replace that system with instant runoff and proportional representation. Okay. Well, I'm a fan of proportional representation. Instant runoff has its problems. I'd rather see either some kind of range voting or Condorcet voting or something like that. But I'm kind of wondering what you mean about when the winner does not have the support of most of the voters. Because, okay, if there's more than two candidates, that can happen. Where they just have a plurality and not the majority. But I'm kind of wondering if we're talking about the Electoral College. But I have a feeling if we read on a little more, we'll get to that. So we'll see if they talk about the Electoral College. Guarantee equal access to the ballot and to the debates of all qualified candidates. Okay. Abolish the Electoral College and implement direct election of the president. Great. Then it's going to be New York and California who decide who the president is for the rest of the country. Why don't you actually read up on why the Electoral College exists? Okay, they knew they didn't want a direct democratic election of the president, and it wasn't because it was too difficult to count the votes or anything like that. It wasn't. They knew that the problem of a direct election would be you'd have a couple major cities voting for someone who would represent them, and everyone else would be left out. The solution that had existed at the time of the founding of our country was the parliamentary system, where you voted in a parliament, what our Constitution calls a Congress, and then Congress would elect the president. Well, they didn't want Congress to elect the president because they didn't want the president to be beholden to Congress, and they didn't want Congress to be able to hold that over him. So they created the Electoral College, which is equal in number to the members of Congress, but the only thing they do is elect the president. Now, if you want to say, okay, the states shouldn't have the winner take all electoral college. They should have it with proportional representation in the electoral college. That I'll get behind. But if you want to end it, that's only because you want your people to rule over everyone else. Your rich people in those few rich parts of the country deciding for everyone else who the president is, just because the rest of us are outnumbered. Restore the vote to ex-offenders who paid their debt to society. I'll agree with that. Once their sentence has been completely carried out and they're off parole and everything out, then yes, you should have all of your rights and privileges restored to you. And enact statehood for the District of Columbia so those Americans have representation in Congress and full rights to self-rule like the rest of us. I will agree with that only if you specifically exclude politicians. Say that politicians do not count as representatives of D.C., but as the representative of, wherever they come from. Because that's what D.C. was originally. It's a place where the politicians go and live while they're doing their stuff, and then they go back home. Our founders weren't figuring on that being a population center. And this is just another example of how they just don't understand these issues. They don't seem to have any understanding of what it is they're talking about. 4. Protect local democracy and democratic rights by commissioning a thorough review of federal preemption law and its impact on the practice of local democracy in the United States. This review will put at its center the democracy question, that is, what level of government is most open to democratic participation and most suited to protecting democratic rights. The government that is most open to that is the government that's going to be most tyrannical. That's going to be mob rule. That is everything that the founders designed our government to prevent. This is supposed to be a republic, not a democracy. And granted, it hasn't quite worked out like the founders envisioned, but that's not because it's not enough of a democracy. It's because you really can't do this with government. You can't do this by giving people power over others. And you can't do it by saying that the law is more than just the people banding together for our own mutual protection, as Frederick Bastiat said in his pamphlet, The Law, which everyone should read. But no, the law is scribbles on paper made by politicians who only got there because they were better at campaigning. And really all the skills you need to campaign are the skills you have naturally if you have narcissistic personality disorder. So, yeah, the law in this country is scribbles on paper made by narcissists. And what you're wanting to do is give those narcissists more power and take away a lot of the protections we have from them. 5. Create a corporation for economic democracy, a new federal corporation. Why am I not surprised they want more federal corporations? Like the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, to provide publicity, training, education, and direct financing for cooperative development and for democratic reforms to make government agencies, private associations, and business enterprises more participatory. In other words, you want a department of propaganda. Read through this. That's exactly what they're talking about. And everyone has to participate in the propaganda, and everyone who doesn't, oh well, I guess too bad for them. 6. Strengthen media democracy by expanding federal support for locally owned broadcast media and local print media. We don't need that. We need more protections for internet media, because that's where the real freedom is coming from. You people don't like it because fake news, fake news, fake news. But again, if you listen to the archives of the Bogosity podcast, we've covered plenty of times where it's the mainstream media that's delivering the fake news. Not that the internet news is, flawless or anything like that, but at least there you have a choice. At least there you have the ability to try and sort out the real from the fake. No, one thing we do not need is more government control of the media. Because already the mainstream media is just a propaganda arm. This would just make that worse. Okay, 7. Protect our personal liberty and freedoms by repealing the Patriot Act and those parts of the NDAA that violate our civil liberties. I'll go along with that. Prohibiting the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI from conspiring with local police forces to suppress our freedoms of assembly and speech. I'll go along with that. In fact, get rid of the Department of Homeland Security. We don't need it. We don't need any of them, really, just in the entire federal government. Ending the war on immigrants, including the cruel so-called Secure Communities program. All right, I'm for open immigration. Rein in the military-industrial complex by reducing military spending by 50% and closing U.S. military bases around the world. If by that you mean bring the troops home, yeah, let's do that. Stop all war. # stop all war. I don't know where they get this 50% figure from, but I'll go along with it. This is probably the only part here where they're actually talking about cutting the federal government. Restoring the National Guard is the centerpiece of our system of national defense. No. It wasn't for well over 100 years, I think. I forget exactly when they formed the National Guard. The centerpiece of our system of national defense was supposed to be citizen militias. But then, if you went back to that, you wouldn't be able to justify gun control, would you? And although you haven't said it, I'm betting that's what you want. You want gun control. You want to seize everyone's firearms. But that's the only way you can have an effective national defense, is with an armed citizenry. Creating a new round of nuclear disarmament initiatives. Well, I'm in favor of that, but, look at the crap that your party has done by things like lying about Iran, where you lied and said that their nuclear power program was a nuclear weapons program when it wasn't. The real way of doing nuclear disarmament would be to enable nuclear power so that we'll take all this weapons-grade material and de-enrich it, make it reactor-grade, and let everyone use it. Let us not rest until we have pulled the nation back from the brink and until we have secured the peaceful, just, green future we all deserve. The only way we can have a peaceful and just future and pull our nation back from the brink is if we take the power away from people like you. And that's just all there is to it. So that looks like it. Thank you for watching. And as always, thanks to all of my supporters. If you'd like to become a supporter, you can support me with Shane DK on Patreon or Subscribestar. You can also support the cryptocurrency. There's links in the description to do that. Also, don't forget Airtime, where you can just install the Airtime extension and you don't really have to do anything except watch my videos with that extension going, and it'll even block ads for you. It incorporates uBlock Origin, which is really good ad blockers. So you won't get ads, but you will help out myself and your other favorite YouTubers when they sign up for it. So thank you for doing that. Until next time, stay strong and be free.